Welcome to the Jerusalem Lights Podcast with Rabbi Chaim Richman, whose goal is Torah for everyone. I'm your co-host, Jim Long, and now Rabbi Chaim Richman.
Shalom, my dear friend James Long.
Shalom, Rabbi. Say, you're still on the air. We haven't been taken off yet.
Well, hold on. The day is young. We may be banned yet. We'll have to watch what we say. And shalom to all our beautiful, wonderful listeners who apparently, well, at least they're able to listen to us, even if they have been banned. And first of all, I want to wish everyone Chodesh Tov, because tonight begins the new month of Shvat, which is the beginning of spring, really, from the 15th of Shvat, the beautiful day of Tu B'Shvat that is celebrated here in Israel as the New Year of the Trees. And there is a very great spiritual portent for humanity as well as all parts of the natural world. On that day, there begins to sparkle forth a promise of new life, of birth, of spring. And it's very, very deep. So the new month of Shvat is in such synchronization right now. We could all use, if you'll pardon me, a shot in the arm. We could all use a new message of hope and renewal. That's what this month brings. I got to tell you, Jim, there's so much going on in the world, and everybody is so confused, and people are getting very, very frustrated. And listen. There's a news blackout. Basically, everybody knows it. Come on. Whoever's listening to our broadcast certainly knows that there is a news blackout. And I am sure that Pharaoh was the originator of all news blackouts. I'm sure there was no freedom of speech in Egypt, because the last thing that he said to Moshe in last week's Torah portion, actually he said it to the children of Israel after Moshe came. He said, don't listen to words of falsehood. Like, that's fake news. What Moshe is telling you, that there's a God in the world, who, by the way, I never heard of, that there's a redemption. Don't listen to that. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Don't listen to words of hope and inspiration. That's falsehood. You know, you're just turning the whole thing on its head. So I'm sure that if Moshe had a Twitter account, he was banned, and I'm sure that his YouTube channel was suspended at that time also, because nothing is new under the sun. And it's amazing. It's also so exquisite, you know, the whole parallel that's going on in our world today with so much mental oppression, so much psychological warfare that is being waged against the common man, just to fall in line and to think a certain way and to just be on this kind of like lobotomized, kind of like, you know, like autopilot. That's what Egypt actually represents. That's what ancient Egypt represents. And I must say something so important right now in the very beginning of our broadcast, which I think is really the theme of our show today. It's an incredible insight that our sages share with us. Because, you know, again, Jim, you and I know that we've discussed this our whole lives together, that the insight of our sages is so phenomenal, and it's so real, and it's so contemporary, and it's so alive, because it's coming from the wisdom of Hashem throughout the ages. Right. The vehicle that they choose to express their, whether it's poetic justice or poetic irony, and their deepest insights. But this is what they say. They say that Egypt was like a hermetically sealed steel trap, and that no slave ever escaped from Egypt until the children of Israel were taken out with a strong hand and an outstretched arm. And that imagery of this hopeless, dystopian world, you know, that is the very, very definition of the word dystopian, that it is totally without hope. And you know that in the writings of our sages and in the Torah itself, we see it also, you know, that Egypt, this experience that we went through in Egypt, was the very, very embodiment of hopelessness and despair, which people are feeling now. And it's a template for all time. I shared a lot of this in our Zoom class last Sunday about the concept of redemption and exile and redemption, the cycle of exile and redemption. Egypt is so important in the iconography of Torah thought, because it is the very personification of what we have to go through in this world in order to bring Hashem's light in. And there's an incredible couple of verses in Ezekiel 29 where look at Ezekiel 29 where Hashem says to bring this message to Pharaoh, and Hashem calls Pharaoh the great serpent,
Yeah.
Hatanin Gadol,
Right. Yeah.
the
It's
great
even on
serpent.
it's even on his crown.
Yes, the
There's a
great
serpent on his.
serpent who crouches in his river, saying, I am the river is mine. Because Pharaoh said that he created the Nile and that he was like the god of the Nile. That's why God told Moshe to go and meet him early in the morning at the Nile, because he was actually relieving himself there, because he convinced everybody that he doesn't have to go to the bathroom because he's a god, right? And
Right.
in those days,
Exactly.
there weren't security cameras everywhere. And he was able to pull off this scam. And then Ezekiel, and first Moshe catches him literally with his pants down, and Ezekiel is told by Hashem to say to him, "You serpent, you devious scam artist is what you are." So the thing is, I got to tell you that this, Jim, that struck me. I think this is just so beautiful because, again, I'm speaking from my heart to everybody who is feeling that we are in Egypt and we will never escape. How are we ever going to escape this? So first of all, Pharaoh, his whole thing is scare tactics, psychological warfare, this pressure, this constriction of Egypt, and I was sharing also with our group. Pharaoh, Paro in Hebrew, is the letters in a different permutation, different order. It's the same letters as Ha'oref, which literally means the nape of the neck.
Yeah.
Because the nape of the neck, the back of your head, is a place that you don't know what it looks like. So you can only imagine what it looks like, right? So the idea that our sages are conveying in a very, very deep secret is that Pharaoh represents the manipulation of a person's imagination, the manipulation of a person's greatest fear. Because fear tactics is what the totalitarian authoritarian government is all about. And of course, when he said, who is Hashem? I never heard of him. That's like big government opposite God, which is exactly the situation that we're in right now.
Oh yeah.
But this is what I wanted to share with you, Jim. Listen, the end of last week's Torah portion of Shemot, open up your heart in the deepest way. The end of last week's Torah portion, it leaves us on a note that's very, very sad. It's like Pharaoh says, okay, that's it. You people are not even giving you straw anymore. The people have to spread out through the entire lands. The taskmasters are pressing, complete your work without straw, go get it yourself. And then like the foreman of the children of Israel comes and says to Pharaoh, what are you doing to us? Like, what are you doing to us? You're not giving us straw. You're not telling us to make bricks. And so Pharaoh says, you're lazy. Therefore you say, go and we're going to bring offerings to Hashem. You bunch of lazy people, go to work, make your bricks, right? And so the foremen of the children of Israel encounter Moshe and Aaron, and they're leaving Pharaoh, and they say, thanks a lot, man. Thanks a lot. May God look at you and judge. This is exactly what they say, because you have made our scent abhorrent in the eyes of Pharaoh. You're letting them murder us. Thanks a lot for all your help. And then Moshe, this is the end of chapter 5, in last week's Torah, Moshe turns to Hashem and says, what my Hashem, what have you done? Why have you done this? From the time that you sent me, it's getting worse and worse. And Hashem says to Moshe, now you'll see what I shall do to Pharaoh. For through a strong hand will he send them out, and with a strong hand will he drive them out from his land. And now, then Parashat Va'era, today's Parsha, this week's Torah portion begins, right? And this just shows you the depth of the Torah. You have to understand and there's no extraneous word. So the Parsha begins in chapter 6 and verse 2 with this. God spoke to Moshe and said to him, I am Hashem. And then it continues with something extremely deep that is amazing. That is, I hope we'll talk about in our video this week, that I appeared to Abraham, to Yitzchak, and to Yaakov as El Shaddai, but I didn't tell them my name Hashem. So that is just so deep. What is that all about? And why now is he revealing that his name is Yud He Vav He, is Hashem? I'll talk about that a different time. But I wanted to say, you would overlook it, but the first verse is actually so important, where all Hashem says is God spoke to Moshe and said to him, I am Hashem. You know what that is, Jim? That is a direct continuation of the way we left off Parashat Shemot, with such angst, with such anxiety, feeling so vulnerable. Like, what have you done? Like, and Hashem says, wait, I am Hashem. That is all you need to know. That is right. Like that. This verse is so potent, it's so full because it's the answer to everything. This is, you could overlook it like, okay, this is like the introduction to the Parsha, and Hashem is introducing himself to Moshe saying, God spoke to Moshe saying, and said to him, I am Hashem. No, this is his answer. This is Hashem's answer to what Moshe was asking at the end of the last Parsha. What's Hashem, what gives? What do I do now? What have you done? And Hashem says, you don't understand something. I am Hashem. I am Hashem. You know why? Because this entire Parsha is, then the entire Parsha continues where, what do we have, listeners? What do we have this week? We have 7 out of the 10 plagues are in this Parsha. And the whole concept of these plagues is, I am Hashem.
Yeah.
I'm Hashem. It's not what you thought. It's not what you thought. Rules? Yeah. No, there are no rules here. There are no rules here.
Rabbi, and of course, the question is, some listeners who didn't get in last week might ask is, what is the source of all of this fear and this angst? And we know that the Parsha began with, there arose a king who knew not Yosef. And that nails it right there, because we have, especially the people of present-day Israel, you and all the citizens of Israel, you have a lot of reasons to be even more concerned. I know it sounds like, well, Jim, look what's going on over in America, but look, this new king that we have here is getting ready to, even with his cabinet choices, he and all of his cabinet choices are people who basically are going to reverse all of the groundwork laid to mend the fences between Israel and all of her partners in the Middle East that are coming aboard. I'll stop there and throw it back to you, because
and also, Jim, what about Iran? What about the whole deal with Iran? I mean, Iran is like blatantly just like smiling at the world and saying, nah, come and get me. I'm making yellow cake. I'm enriching my uranium. I'm pumping the centrifuges. I want to destroy Israel. That never changed. And the EU says, we're very concerned about this. We have to act quickly to bring them back into the deal. And as we have to act quickly to walk back, to take back, the damage that Trump did by sanctioning Iran, we have to bring them back. What are you talking about? It's like you're in a dream sequence where you're trying to yell and words won't come out. You can't open your mouth. And like, is this real? Is the world insane? And something will happen. I'm sure something's going to happen because this is Israel. Either Israel won't tolerate it, or something will happen.
And speaking of a word that I'm getting tired of hearing, the word Twitter, the president and anyone who supported him is being banned from Twitter. But yet Khomeini, the Ayatollah, has literally been calling for the destruction of Israel, and he can do it right there on Twitter, and Twitter lets him do it.
And it's free speech. Well, Jack Dorsey will tell you what free speech is. Don't you dare think you know what free speech is. Sometimes, Jim, free speech is not such a good thing, because people like you think that you can think. We'll tell you what to think. Yeah. So not only does the Ayatollah have his personal Twitter account, but Nasrallah, the chairman of Hezbollah, has a Twitter account, and in January 2020, he made a speech calling for the death of every American soldier in the Middle East. He's got a Twitter account. That's okay. So I want to speak more about Twitter, but I don't want to skip over the plague of blood. But the plague of frogs is the time to talk about Twitter, because Twitter is a tweet, and tweet is a
noise.
Exactly. And one of the things that the Midrash says is, why did Hashem bring this plague of frogs onto the Egyptians? Because they were making them insane with their riveting. And what happened was, open up your heart in the deepest way, the Egyptians used to burst into the homes of the Israelites in the middle of the night and wake them up and make sounds in their ears and wake them up and say, get up, Jew, get up, go and do your work now, get up. They used to wake them up. Understand? So this is the Midrash from what, 3,000 years ago? So Hashem says, so you know what? I'm going to make, and this is chilling. This is the word of the Midrash says, I'm going to make little tweeters. I'm going to make little noisemakers in your ears now. So the whole tweeting thing, which of course is the symbol, that bird is the symbol of Lashon Hara. It is the symbol of the iniquity, the unforgivable iniquity of gossip. That's what it is. Anyway, let me just pace myself because I'm so running on over time here. I'm beside myself with everything. But what I'm saying is this whole business with Pharaoh. You could just take like an overlay, like before we had cut and paste, and before we had all the technical things that we used to just do overlays with an overhead projector, and you used to take one layer and put it on another layer. That's what's going on here. That's this month of Shvat and these Torah portions and the contemporary reality. It's all one solid unit. And Jim, listen, prison break is what this parsha is. This parsha is called Prison Break: the action begins. Because, as I said, the Midrash tells us, our sages tell us, that no slave was ever able to flee from Egypt. It was hermetically sealed until Hashem took out the children of Israel. But now it begins, the edifice begins to crack. It's in this week's parsha. This process of the plagues is the beginning of the prison break. And Jim, I say that, I'm emphasizing that even as my theme today, because we're all in prison. We are all in this. It's all this incredible psychological warfare that's being waged against us. The fear of COVID. You have to get a vaccine, and you can't have social contact, and you can't think certain things because then you're treason, it's sedition. You can't possibly support certain things. You can't think certain things. That's not democracy. That's not who we are. Everything is being shaped and formatted by groupthink and by what is considered to be politically correct. And woe is you if you don't meet that requirement, because you will be demonized and ostracized, and you're being worse than a leper. That's exactly where we're going here. If tens of thousands of accounts can be suspended, if the president of the United States can't even have his own account and is banned, it's all too absurd. It's all too absurd. So, but the point is, it's also totally on schedule. It's like I look at this and I see order. I see order because and that's the thing again. It's all a scam. It's Ezekiel 29. You great serpent there in the water. Oh, I made the river. I'm God. That's like what the politicians basically want us to believe. They're going to take care of everything. Oh, don't worry. I'm from the government. I'm here to help you. And the thing is that what this whole Exodus story teaches us today, Parashat Va'era, beginning in chapter 6 of Exodus, it's prison break, episode number 1, we're beginning to understand. Hashem answered Moshe, wait, I'm Hashem. Don't worry. There are no rules. And what everyone thinks is a certain order in the world, just because it looks like that, doesn't mean anything, because it's all concealment, and Hashem is concealed, and we have to find him. But I have a question to ask you. It's a very simple, obvious question that it begs asking, and we try to remember to ask it every year, right? Why did Hashem have to go through this? Why this order of these plagues? Why it was a long, drawn out affair, Jim? Wasn't it over a year?
Yeah, it was a year, and every plague lasted a week.
Every plague lasted a week, and there was a residual from the previous plague. Why didn't Hashem just instantaneously, when the moment came, take the children of Israel out? Why? And some people erroneously think that the plagues were a punishment upon Egypt, and that is not true. It wasn't about a punishment at all. And what is the answer?
Well, I know one answer, but I want to hear yours. But I think the answer is that it each of the plagues was matches the 10 declarations in the Torah and the creation of the world, and each one is matches. It's God's way of saying, I am God, because each of the plagues was a strike against a god of Egypt.
Jim, we're using this software. I can see you as we're recording, and I want to just bend over and kiss you on the forehead. I always kiss my students on the forehead when they say something beautiful and true, and I see the Torah shining through them. I'm so absolutely astounded because that is exactly the answer. You are so wise and you are so learned in the Torah. The 10 plagues, to be succinct about it, are Maaseh Breshit inverted. They are literally the steps of creation unraveled in backwards order. In other words, the last thing to be created was Adam. The first plague was blood. And this is people say, well, what kind of blood was it? It was human blood. It was human blood.
Yes,
And
please.
and it was everywhere. It
Yeah.
was in the sticks and stones. There's a midrash that talks about how Egypt had a certain border dispute with Cush, right, with another country, and the plagues succeeded in settling the border dispute because the plagues were exactly within the boundary of Egypt and nowhere else. And of course, if an Israelite would be drawing water from the well, standing right next to an Egyptian pouring from the same water to make the morning coffee. For the Jew, it was water, and for the Egyptian, it was blood. And the Egyptian would try to get some of it from the Jew, and it would turn to blood. It was a horrible experience.
You
And
know, Rabbi, in my book, not to be plugging my book, but
but you should.
I shamelessly will anyway. There's one chapter where I name each of the Egyptian gods that each of the strikes, because the Torah doesn't say plague, it says
But
strikes, right?
I want to hear that because this is really juicy stuff. Because the fact is, I was going to ask you if there is, in your incredible research, historical mention in the annals of Egypt of these places. Before I ask you, I just want to say one more thing, and then I really want to give you the
Sure.
floor. But you know how you and I have, from time to time, spoken about our admiration for our friend Dr. Gerald Schroeder and the whole concept of the reconcilement of Torah and science, and he, as a nuclear physicist, unbelievable things that he's written in his book, like Genesis and the Big Bang, about how there is no contradiction between, let's say, nuclear physics or quantum mechanics and Torah. So there is a whole school of thought where there are people well-meaning people, who try to prove the plagues through science because for example, here's a very popular one that is very easy to find on the internet. There are people that say, oh, this whole thing about the biblical account of the Nile turning to blood. Well, there's a phenomena to this very day in certain places where rivers turn red because of the chemical compounds in the soil in that area, atmospheric conditions, and different things. And so you see, it's true. They want to say, you see, the Torah is true because here it happens, but that's not it at all, and that's not the same thing that you and I share about Torah and science reconciling. Torah and science really does reconcile, but it really was blood. So show me a river that's of human blood, and that is exactly what happened here. You don't have to apologize and try to say, oh, it's true because after all, rivers turned red, and that's what this is a description. No, this is a description of real blood. And so the idea is the reason why Hashem did it this way, and not just in a straightforward, revealed, instantaneous Hollywood manner of taking them up, and instead this slow process, is because he had a point to prove, because so many verses we find here in Exodus and in our parsha of why Hashem did this. Like I say, it wasn't a punishment, but it was so that they would know, so that he is Hashem. Both the Israelites and the Egyptians, it was so that they would know. And this whole idea, there's a very special Hebrew expression describing the process of the plagues that Hashem made, and it's called Shidud HaMarachot, which literally means that he broke or stole from nature. In other words, he showed that he is above nature. Some people think, oh, God is nature. God is the natural world. No, Hashem is saying, I created the world. I created nature. I don't have any boundaries. I don't have any borders. I can't be contained. I don't owe you any explanation. You don't expect anything. And that's why, Jim, and I know I really want to give this to you, but I want to remember this. The experience of what happened in Egypt is so important and so pivotal for all humanity because of this declaration that we find here. I am Hashem, and he did it this way to show that that he is above everything and that he makes the rules and breaks the rules, and that you can't count on anything in your comfortable world. This is so important that every week on Friday night in Kiddush, when we sanctify the Sabbath, it's the most important moment of the week because we are sanctifying the seventh day, right? It's the greatest commandment. It's a cornerstone of our lives is the Sabbath. And we inaugurate every Sabbath on Friday night over a cup of wine. We sanctify the day and we bless Hashem for creating the world in 6 days and for renewing the creation and the whole process. And in that prayer, what do we say about the creation of the world and Hashem resting on the seventh day? That it is a remembrance of the going out of Egypt.
Yeah.
It doesn't even make any sense. What is the going out of Egypt, which happened, thousands of years after Hashem created the world? What does that have to do with the original Shabbat? What it has to do with is that those two are like parallel tracks of one principle. Our belief in Hashem's creation of the world is on the same level as Hashem's manifestation of Himself as being supernature with the miracles of the going out of Egypt.
Yeah. Well, I think what's remarkable is that the Torah goes to pains. It could have continually said, "This nation, these people that have done this to you," etc. It always names Egypt, continually names Egypt. And as you just pointed out, what does Mitzrayim mean? It means constraint. It means concentration. And what you just said points to that. God taking on this nation that was a world empire whose name meant constraint, just like you said. He said, I don't have any constraints. You cannot constrain the God of these people. And so he blatantly was in their face with that. And these so-called strikes are amazing in that we've never seen anything like them. In fact, there are Egyptian scholars that will tell you that there is a record of the River Nile being turned to blood. It's in their own history. It's in their ancient annals, and they will tell you that this was a singularly remarkable event in the history of the Middle East. Was a river, the great River Nile, which I believe is one of the, if not the largest. It is one of the largest rivers in the world. And for God to take over this thing that was worshipped as a god, that was his first strike against one of their gods. And you can go to now. I pointed out before, I think even last year in this podcast, that we have a very well known artifact called the Ipuwer papyrus, which is in Leiden in the Netherlands. It's on display. And that it is like reading an Egyptian telling from his point of view, this Egyptian priest named Ipuwer, he's making a catalog of these strikes, these woes against his country. And one of my favorite verses in Ipuwer recalls what God told Moshe Rabbeinu when he was still at Sinai. And he said, this is what you're going to do, Moshe. You're going to take your rod, et cetera, et cetera. And in last week's Parsha, he said, you shall take some water from the Nile and spill it on the ground. And that water you take from the Nile will turn to blood on the ground. And what does Ipuwer say? He says, behold, Egypt is poured out like water. He who poured water on the ground has captured the strong man in misery.
Wow.
And then it says,
say that again. You have to say that again.
This is like, it's as if Ipuwer had read the Torah.
Right.
Yeah, but he's saying, look, this is what I saw. He says, and I can give you the number of the verse in the Ipuwer papyrus, verse 2:6. Plague is throughout the land, blood is everywhere. Verse 2:10. Forsooth, the river is blood. Number 7:4. Behold, Egypt is poured out like water. He who poured out water on the ground has captured the strong man in misery.
Goodness. And what is the dating on this manuscript?
The Ipuwer papyrus was written, they believe, the first translators, Sir Alan Gardner, said it was written down. It was a copy. It was written in the Ptolemaic period, but it was a copy from a text written at the end of the Old Kingdom period. the end of the sixth dynasty, which is the time we believe that all of these things took place, because the end of the sixth dynasty is famous in Egyptology for being a time when the empire was literally overturned and brought to its knees and destroyed literally overnight. But it doesn't stop there. Everybody, I think, is familiar with what I read. But there is another there's another text in Egypt. You can see it today if you visit the Valley of Luxor, which I have, and you go into the tomb of Seti. And Seti was the grandfather of Pharaoh Ramesses, okay? And Pharaoh Ramesses, I won't take time out, Pharaoh Ramesses was not the Pharaoh of the Exodus, okay? And I go to
Who was
pains.
the Pharaoh of the Exodus again?
Well, I believe, according to the research that I've done, that in the Egyptian records, he was a Pharaoh. Well, there's two pharaohs. There's the Pharaoh who came on the scene and put the Israelites into deep, harsh bondage. The Pharaoh that the sages tell us bathe in the blood of Hebrew infants, the ones who put them into building the store cities. The Your sources tell us that his name was Melul, and he ruled for 94 years. And his analog in the Egyptian records was called Neferkare Theops. And Neferkare, he was also called Pepi II. And he also ruled 94 years. Now, what is unique is that this Pharaoh in the Egyptian records is famous for being the only Pharaoh that ever ruled that long in Egyptian history. Now, Ramesses only ruled for about 65 years. But this guy who's also in the same records, ruled for 94, just as your ancient, your Chazal and your ancient, the other text that refer to this. But I want to tell you about the grandfather of Ramesses, Seti. So he's writing on his tomb is a text called the Book of the Heavenly Cow. And of course, the heavenly cow was called Hathor. And of course, we know the cow was worshipped in ancient Egypt. Pharaoh was his name even sounds like cow or bull, Parah. And on his tomb walls is this text about the heavenly cow, and it's also called the destruction of mankind. And the reason they call it that is because the Egyptians thought, when they write about this destruction that is in this inscription on the tomb of Seti, they thought the whole world had been experiencing what they had gone through. And on Seti's tomb, it speaks of divine punishment against the Egyptians, and also an attempt to punish the enemies of Ra. So there were people inside Egypt that were considered the enemies of the god called Ra, which was their preeminent god. And it speaks of a revolt by these non-Egyptians on this tomb inscription called the Book of the Heavenly Cow. It speaks of the Nile running red with blood. Okay? This is in a time past.
This is so remarkable. It's just incredible.
It gets better. It gets better. It talks about the Nile running red with blood. Folks, this is an Egyptian text. And it says the magicians of Egypt tried to replicate this curse. Now, what do we know about from the Torah? We read it in this week's Parsha. They tried to replicate. In fact, they were able to replicate not the exact plague, but it was the illusion. It was like a magician. A magician doesn't really have.
They were conjurers. They were conjurers. Just mirrors. Their whole deal was
exactly.
They were spin masters, and it was all about manipulating like people's thoughts. And so it was basically just an illusion, is what they were able to do. And then they weren't even able to make an illusion of the lice.
The inscription says that the magicians of Egypt tried to duplicate the Nile turning to blood, and they used pigments to try to do this.
Is it right there?
It says it in the text of this
book. Says that they cheated?
They cheated.
Shamelessly.
So
wow.
Now here's the best one. The text also refers to a god. And you translate this from the hieroglyphics, but not hieroglyphic. Hieroglyphic, by the way, is an adjective. It's hieroglyphs. Okay? It says that they refer to a god called I am who I am.
Oh my goodness.
Isn't that crazy?
Incredibly remarkable.
And there is another ancient papyrus called the Westcar papyrus. And in the Westcar papyrus, it speaks of a magician who became angry with a neighbor. So the magician creates a crocodile out of wax, and he used it to terrorize the neighbor. And then when he was through, to demonstrate his own powers to the neighbor, it says he grabbed the crocodile, and it returned back to its wax figure, to this little wax figure. And of course, we know that when Moshe and Aaron were in the court of Pharaoh, they threw down their rods to demonstrate they had come from God. And it says the Egyptians threw down their own rods and they became snakes. And then, of course, the miracle is that Aaron's rod, not as a snake, but as a rod, it swallowed up the other rods of the magicians. So we have all of these references that people that refer to the first 7 plagues that we run into this week, and we know that the frogs, they actually were able to, in some way, duplicate or create an illusion that they could create frogs overrunning Egypt. And I want to read again. I'm going to go back to the Ipuwer papyrus, and it says here that in Exodus 8:2, Aaron stretched forth his hand over the waters of Egypt, and the frog came up. It's singular. It's very interesting. The frog came up, and they covered the land. Now, you just mentioned what was the real plague of the frog?
I can't believe that you said that. It actually says that in the singular.
Well, no, this is from Torah.
Oh, this is from Torah.
This is from Torah. But I want to ask you. You just mentioned what was the real
according
calamity?
To Torah sources, according to our sages, this is what you were referring to. I thought you were mentioning the Egyptian document. According to our sages, the plague of frogs originally originated as one big frog.
Right. But what was the plague? It wasn't just the frog. You just mentioned it. It was the noise.
It was the noise, and it was their ubiquitous presence in every inch of their being. But it was one frog, Jim. There was one frog.
Yeah, and it says that when they went up and they beat on it, more frogs
split into
other frogs. Well, what I was mentioning is that you went to great lengths to talk about the noise of that plague. Ipuwer says this. Now I'm going back to the Ipuwer papyrus again to compare it. It says, "Oh, that the earth would cease from noise, and there was tumult no more." And I'm trying to look at one of the other. There's the plagues of the wild beast. That hasn't happened yet, has it? Or it has. The first 7 plagues. Now, what did remember the plague of boils? Okay, it says Moses threw ashes into the air. It caused a rash, breaking out in boils. And man and beast, the master symbolist, the magicians, could not stand before Moses as a result of these boils. And what do we know is if you read medical journals, one of the things that happens with boils is your hair is affected. The hair on your body sometimes falls out. All right. And it says in papyrus, verse number 4, in the Ipuwer papyrus, "Forsooth, hair has fallen out for everyone." And remember, it says, "Forsooth, all animals, their hearts weep." Remember, it struck the animals too. Cattle's moan because of the state of the land. And then we have the.
Why did Moshe take why did Hashem tell Moshe to take from the soot of the furnace and throw it up into the air? And then when the dust settled, everyone had boils.
Right.
So in his commentary on the Torah, Rabbi Hirsch of blessed memory points out that in ancient times, the cure for boils was soot from the furnace.
Yeah,
that was the treatment. Right. They used to rub it on the boils.
Yeah.
So
we know this from Job.
Take that very exactly. So take that very thing which they would anticipate getting relief from, and let the plague spring forth from the very thing that they would have thought would give them relief.
Now I'll give you one more, and then we'll
of how Hashem was basically saying,
here's what's interesting
on the borders.
Exactly. So what's also very interesting is that, and I added this to my documentary because it's new evidence. A scholar that I work with who lives in Israel is called Alexander Houle, and I found out he was a fan of my book, So we got to talking and everything. I went to meet him. He lives in Bnei Brak, and he's written a wonderful book about the Megillah and showing you can find it in Persian history. So after we got to know each other, he was so encouraged by my book, he decided to extend the research, and he wrote a book called Pharaoh, and he helped resolve one of the problems I've had trying to show people that the pharaohs that these people were co-regents. That when you talk about a pharaoh of a certain dynasty ruling in one part of Egypt, and you have another pharaoh who rules in, like, one rules in the north, one administrates in the south, that they're in the Egyptian records, they're put consecutively to make it look like Egypt's history is longer and older than it is. When even some of the ancient historians say the Egyptians fudged in their records because a lot of these kings were co-regents. So what Alex does in a very brilliant way is he shows us that I've always maintained that the Pharaoh of the Exodus was a sixth dynasty Pharaoh. And he says, Jim, you're right. But his co-ruler was a guy who ruled in what is called, and these numbers are what confuses everybody. Anyway, he says, you're right. He says the Pharaoh Neferkari the Younger was the Pharaoh of the Exodus. He ruled at the end of the sixth dynasty. But at the same time, a Pharaoh called Thutmose was ruling in another part of the country. They were co-regents. And he sent me pictures, and I put them in the documentary. Pharaoh Thutmose, his mummy is covered with, we have his mummy today. And we also have the mummy of his wife's nanny. His wife was Hatshepsut. She was a queen. Anyway,
Mama's mummy?
Huh? Yeah,
Sorry.
exactly. But anyway, the mummy, we have the mummy of Thutmose and the mummy of his wife's nanny. Both mummies are covered with scars from head to toe, scarring from boils.
Wow.
So it's the evidence is mounting up over the years as of these plagues, of these catastrophes. And I've mentioned this before. The people who study Egyptian literature, whether it's from an inscription or from their tales and their stories, contain over 90 references to Exodus-like experiences: the splitting of the sea, the Nile being turned to blood, and you just heard some of those things that I just read to you that are written on a physical stone wall in the valley of the Kings in Luxor.
I'm so appreciative of your incredible scholarship, Jim. This is really what you've shared with us. Is nobody's going to hear it anywhere else, and it's just so incredible to hear all of this.
Something that I would like you to address is, and I think we brought this up before, as each of these plagues came on, beginning with the first plague, in the English translations, when the first plague comes on and Pharaoh's response is, it says, Pharaoh hardened his heart. And that's not what the text says. What does it say? It says that Pharaoh strengthened. It says God strengthened Pharaoh's heart. Now, later on, at the end of the 10 plagues, Pharaoh has taken upon himself to literally, harden his heart. But when I was a kid and I would read that, and I even understood basically as a youngster the idea of free will, and they used to really frighten me as a kid to read when the first plague came and it says that God hardened Pharaoh's heart. I thought, well, that means God can take away anybody's free will. And God is not supposed to do that. That's what makes humanity, his own creation, unique of all humanity. And yet, that's not what the Torah says. It says he strengthened.
Not in the beginning. In the beginning, Pharaoh had his free will and chose to harden his own heart, as it were, chose to be in denial, right? There he is in the Nile. But what you can surmise from the process here, like towards the end, there is a change, and Hashem hardened his heart.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that when you read that first time, it comes from the word hazak.
Yes.
Hazak, which I believe means strengthened, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. But the idea is that there's only so much that Hashem can tolerate. and you
Right.
get to a certain point, and you will no longer have your own free choice. And it's the same thing today as well, Jim. I mean, I'm sorry, but the parallels between what's going on and what we're in reading in the living Torah is so perfect. The like I say, the overlay of the transparency of in time, and there's only so much evil that Hashem can tolerate. And that's also a part of the message of this month of Shvat is this message of renewal and taking a deep breath and preparing for a new beginning. And basically, Moshe is going to Pharaoh, and he's saying, "Enough is enough. We're not going to take it anymore. Enough is enough. I'm warning you. I'm warning you." And it gets to a point where Hashem is going to say, "No, I'm not giving you any choice anymore. You had your chance." And this is the thing: is that a lot of people today also are very anxiety ridden and very concerned with what's going on, and they feel very hopeless. And what they have to understand is that we are on the verge of an exodus. We're on the verge of redemption. And however long that takes, Hashem promised it. Hashem promised it, just like He promises here in the very beginning of Va'era. We have the famed, 4 expressions of redemption. Where Hashem says, "I am Hashem, and I shall take you out from under the burdens of Egypt. I shall rescue you from their service. I shall redeem you with an outstretched arm. I shall take you to me for a people, and shall be a God to you." And these are the things that Hashem promised to Abraham back at the covenant between the portions in Parashat Lech Lecha. And bear in mind that when it comes to the future redemption, the verse in the prophet Micah, chapter 7 and verse 14, reminds us that Hashem says, "I will show him great wonders." Our sages say the miracles that will be manifest in the time of the ultimate redemption will outshine and dwarf
Yeah.
the going out from Egypt. It will be so miraculous. And so what I feel I want to emphasize to people who are feeling the constriction of the Egypt that we're going through now is you need to work on preparing a vessel to hold the light that's coming, because there's a great light coming, and you can't use it. You can't use your old vessels. You can't. Your old account is banned. Okay, your WhatsApp, they're changing the rules, and 500 million people have now downloaded Telegram. I don't have stock in either, but I know that 25 million or something in the last 72 hours alone. Change your account, whatever you need to do, but make your vessel strong and worthy to receive a new light that's coming into the world. And because the reason that so many people now are broken and feeling, this tension is because everything is changing. Hashem is changing the world, and so get up with the program, and we need to run with it and be ready to receive that new light. And it's all with joy. Listen, this is exactly. Please listen with your deepest heart open ever. Everyone, this is exactly why our sages say in the Haggadah, everyone's familiar with the Passover Haggadah. What does the person have to say at the Seder table every year on Passover? The Haggadah says a man must view himself as if he personally left Egypt tonight. Every person who does not view himself as if he personally was taken out from Hashem this night has not fulfilled his obligation. Why? Because it's real. Because Hashem is constantly taking us out, and He's beckoning to us to do this now. And the thing is, I find it interesting that also the Israelites that were enmeshed in the culture in Egypt, that were enmeshed in the trappings and in the seduction of Egyptian society. It's painful to bring up, but the fact is that only 1/5 of all the Israelites even left.
That's right.
4/5 of the Israelites stayed behind, and they didn't leave Egypt because they weren't ready, or they didn't want to, or they didn't believe that it was happening. Whatever, they did not come back. They did not come
Isn't there
out.
a commentary that says that those who did not believe and respond to the words of Moshe, that they perished during the
During the
plague of
plague of
darkness?
darkness, exactly.
Yeah.
And so the thing is, those that were redeemed, they were redeemed in the merit of the fact that although they were plunged into this foreign culture, they did not change their names and they did not change their language. They stayed faithful to their identity. And you know that American Jewry, for example, Jim, is at a crossroads. It's at a crossroads, and all of this tension in society in America that is so polarized now, and that is so fractioned and division, and with such division, it's terrible. It's coming back. It's coming back onto the Jews as well, and they have to make their move. They have to understand that that it's not their place. That they belong in the land of Israel. This is the concept of what the redemption is all about, and this is part of the idea of that every person is obligated to see himself that he has left Egypt, and that he must leave Egypt.
And I think it's people. I'm sorry, I'm going to get political again. I don't want to get us in trouble, but I mean, the Jewish community in this country. This is what's going on right now is a warning call to the Jewish community. It's really time to consider Aliyah, a new appointee to the Justice Department. She will handle civil rights for the Justice Department. This woman has a history of being not anti-Israel. She's an anti-Semite. And then even for the nation of Israel, all of the signs are there that they're going to reverse everything that's been done. They want to bring Persia back in as a friend. I'm sorry, Iran. I think it's I think it's time to think about Aliyah.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right, 1,000,000% right. I couldn't agree with you more. This is exactly what I'm trying to say. This is part of the end time scenario, as it were. The door is really closing, and one of my holy teachers says the most beautiful thing. This original thought, I never tire of repeating it in this week's parsha. The idea of the frogs as a metaphor. Hashem, at the beginning of the plague of frogs, Hashem said to Moshe, "Say to Aaron, stretch out your hand with your staff over the rivers, over the canals, and over the reservoirs, and raise up the frogs over the land of Egypt." They were everywhere, right? First Hashem, when he gave the warning, he said, "The river shall swarm with frogs, and they shall ascend and come into your palace, and your bedroom, and your bed, and into the house of your servants and of your people, and into your ovens, and into your kneading bowls."
I want to point out also something. We talked about the fact that each of the plagues was a strike against one of the gods of Egypt. And in the pyramid text, we know that this god, this frog-headed god, was the god who helped Egyptian women to ease them through their final stages of childbirth.
Hashem told Moshe that he's going to execute judgment on Egypt and on its gods. It was like an unraveling of the creative process, retroactively, beginning with that which represents the last stage of creation, going all the way to the beginning, and a kind of undoing creation, because Pharaoh would have said, even if you have a God, he created the world, okay, and that's it. And Hashem is showing that he is the God above nature and above the natural order. And so again, this parsha to me is really the beginning of the prison breakout. This whole amazing description that our sages emphasize, that no one ever escaped from Egypt. That is part of the weapon of Pharaoh, and the Pharaoh of our time and culture as well. This whole feeling of hopelessness, of despair, that there's no point, and the fix is in, and they've won. These powers have won, and we are now basically just being manipulated, and that only lasts for a certain period of time until Hashem shows everyone that he is God. And that's really what we're up to right now in this Torah portion. And again, as we greet this new month of Shvat, which begins tonight, it is the month of total renewal for the whole world, which comes to its beautiful crescendo on Tu B'Shvat, the day that this spark of life bubbles up and resonates within every aspect of the natural world. And people are also compared to trees. The Torah compares a person to a tree, and It's our reality as well. That's the whole secret of Deuteronomy 20 and verse 19. Where is the tree of the field a man? And that's the whole idea of the commonality that we do have in terms of with trees, in terms of renewal and sprouting forth, and spring is on
Rabbi,
the way.
yeah, I want to. I know we're getting close to wrapping it up, and I just want to say that I see again this continued idea that we have hope because Hashem has shown us these things are going to take place, they're going to happen, and it's interesting that the Chatumim, the magicians, could only replicate the first two plagues, and the third plague, the plague of lice. They couldn't duplicate that because of the nature of the plague being that the actual ground turned into lice. And the Khartoumim, the magician, said, well, time's up.
It's the finger of God.
It's the finger of God. And that is the analog I think, for us in this day and age, as we enter this phase that's spoken of, is that those people out there that are creating this illusion, they're going to get to a point. All the illusion they're creating for us is the big illusion is that we don't have any free will, and they're going to take it away from us,
Right.
and that
Right.
your beliefs don't matter. And the news media's continual, dispersion of illusion and of falsehood. It's going to be limited. They're going to we're going to see. I believe we might see God's hand soon, and
I believe
because
we're already seeing it, Jim.
well, exactly. But I mean, the point is that the illusionists are going to be limited, and they're going to be revealed as tricksters.
Yes, and there is a news blackout. No one is hearing the real news anymore, and they're trying to limit free speech and also even private communication. But don't forget that it was during the blackout in Egypt that Hashem really began to mete out justice. And the thought that I'd like to leave our listeners with is the idea that again, this Torah portion shows us, and especially with the its consecutive welcoming of the month of Shvat. This Torah portion is all about the beginning of the breakout from that prison that no one was ever to leave, Egypt, and that mental enslavement as well. And the best is yet to come. And then these Khartoumim, the magicians of Pharaoh, like you said, it's all about illusion. It's all about spin. That's all it's ever been about with that world. It's only spin. It's only just this. They're just wordsmiths, and it's all about making people think that they know something now because we told you something. So that's what. Oh, now that's what they're going to think, and it's like Pharaoh saying, "Oh, don't listen to him. Don't listen to words of falsehood. There is no God," and this is really what it all boils down to, is that we live in a world of illusion and fakery, and that's what these magicians represent. And they're powerless. Their fuel is hysteria, mass manipulation, and exploitation. And the more that they made the people afraid, the more that they were in control. And so the most important thing to understand is that there's only, like Hashem says in the beginning of the Torah portion, I am Hashem. That's all you need to know. Everything else will fall apart completely. And there is a new light that's coming into the world, and may we be blessed to have the fortitude to receive it with joy and good health, and to go on from here out of the narrow place, out of the constriction, to the time that the prophet Micah saw that will outshine the miracles of Egypt, to the great and ultimate redemption. That is what we are headed for. And all of these annoyances that we are putting up with now, all of the blackout and all of the bans and all of the nonsense, it's all nothing more than a distraction. We are being distracted from the truth, because the truth is that it's only Hashem.
My source of encouragement is, as Pharaoh was faced with each of these plagues, he needed his heart to be strengthened so he wouldn't give in to what were the overwhelming evidence that there was a creator that basically held sway over all of nature. At the same time, the people of Israel, the opposite happened. Their hearts were strengthened to believe in the Creator. And I think we can take comfort from that. As we go into all this, we can say, we're not surprised by any of this. It's in God's hands, and it's a miracle that we get to even witness all of this, even as harsh as some of it seems right now.
Amen. And I ask our listeners, if they appreciate our broadcasts, to consider supporting our work at Jerusalem Lights to enable us to be able to continue our outreach, teaching Torah, and spreading the encouragement that we need so much in this generation.
Amen.
Shalom, shalom.